Wednesday night will be Christmas, and we won't be here for that. We will be here Tuesday night at 9 for Christmas Eve service. So the topic tonight is what we celebrate generally on the third Sunday of Advent, which we did this past Sunday, and it's joy. In the Advent season, the third Sunday of Advent is sometimes called Gaudete Sunday, and if you notice in the Advent wreath, the pink candle is lit, and that's because in the ancient world, the pink candle represented a rose, which was something that was thought to be joyful. And so that became the tradition in the church, and that's why we light that particular candle. But joy is another one of those words that we easily throw around, like hope and peace. And it may not mean the same thing in our everyday secular going about as it does in the New Testament. And so sometimes it's difficult to separate things off where they need to be separated. And one of the things that I've learned in looking at languages is that our most simple terms, the ones that we just assume we know how to use and we know what they mean, become very, very hard to pin down. They're elusive little creatures. Just like peace is an elusive little thing when you start to try to analyze it. Joy is no different. Joy is a thing that certainly has to do with our Christianity, our faith, and especially with this season of the year. But when we start trying to analyze it, it gets very slippery. How do we know we're talking about the kind of joy that the Bible is talking about? So that's what we're going to do tonight. Before we do that, let's have prayer to bless our food and our time together tonight. Gracious God, we give you thanks for the season of Advent. We give you thanks that we're nearing the end of it and headed toward Christmas, the celebration of all celebrations for the Christian year. We pray that you will bless our time together, that it will be fruitful, and that the food that we've shared will nurture us. In his name we pray. Amen. All right. So, joy. We use it in our hymns. We got one that's really big this time of year that uses the word joy. What's that? Joy to the world. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room. Let heaven and nature sing. Right? Let heaven and nature sing. Won't leave the last little verse out. So yeah, we sing this beautiful song. It's actually not even a Christmas song if you start reading the lyrics to it. There's really nothing that centers it on Christmas, but by tradition it became a Christmas hymn. And there are others in the hymn book, plenty of them, that had the word joy in them. Think of any others right off the top of your head? Joyful, joyful, we adore thee. From the tune, I guess, tune is from Beethoven's Ode to Joy. Any others? Y'all too full now, aren't you? Well, there's an old one, and y'all don't have to help me out on this. This will liven you up a little bit. I was trying to think of something this morning that we could do that everyone would know, and it's one that probably all of us learned at some point in our lives. I got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, right? Okay, my whole life has been a fraud, y'all. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I was stopped by the office this morning, and I mentioned to Lucretia that I might get us to do that little ditty. And when I said, I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, she went, where? I thought she was being rude. And so I go back in my office and I pull a couple of videos up. And all of them say where. And so I just learned then that my whole life was a fraud because I didn't know you were supposed to do that. All right, so y'all ready? I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart, down in my heart. I got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart to say. Y'all want to do the last one? If the devil doesn't like him, sit on tack. Remember that one? I have no idea where that song came from, but I think it's universally known in every church. So we use words with joy. What are we talking about when we say, I got the joy down in my heart? Obviously, we mean something by it. What is it that we mean when we say,
we're
happy? But happiness is such a fleeting thing, isn't it? I can be happy right now, and one of you can give me a dirty look, and it's going to make me unhappy. So if joy is something sustained, I think that's how most of us initially think. But joy is something that we want to look at. It is sustained in good moments and in bad moments. Even when things aren't going right for us, we want to have joy. C.S. Lewis, y'all know I love C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis wrote a lot of essays. One of the best essays, in fact, I think the best essay that he wrote was one called The Weight of Glory. And in it, he said that joy is a longing in us. And the reason it's a longing in us is because we have those moments where we have this sense, this inexplicable sense of joy. We don't create it ourselves. It happens to us. It's a gift from God, and we have those moments. It can be anything. It can be a grandparent's first look at a grandbaby. It can be something that happens to you when you're driving down the road and a particular song comes on. It can be seeing an old friend that you haven't seen in a long time. You just get this inexplicable sense of joy. But generally it doesn't last. And what happens is that creates a longing inside of us for the experience again. Now here's what Lewis said. He said that really and truly, it's that concept of joy that led Lewis from atheism into Christianity. Because he said, if you go back and you try to repeat the experience where you felt that joy, it won't be the same. You won't feel it. If you listen to that same song that gave you that feeling of joy on the inside, that just did something to you, you couldn't contain it. You just had this powerful sense of joy inside you. If you go back and listen to that song, going in the same car to the same place you went before, recreate all the conditions, it won't happen. So he said that joy is something that we don't create. It's something that is given to us, to all of us, from time to time. But for him, the non-Christian at the time, he couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And it finally dawned on him that God, who sends the rain on the unjust and the unjust, who gives to all of us a common grace, that experience was coming from the grace of God. And that's what drove him finally from atheism into Christianity, was the fact that joy was something that he longed for more than anything else. That it created this sense of needing it again. And he realized that the only place he could get it was from God. So joy for Lewis became what he called the thing that is desirable more than anything else. And he would go on to say in different ways, different places, that joy is something that all of us as Christians should experience. Now, there will be times when it's more intense than others. And around this time of year, sometimes it can be more intense. Joy can be, as well as other emotions too, sorrow and pain. But there's something about the approach of Christmas where we celebrate the coming of Jesus and we anticipate the coming again of Jesus. And the reason we decorate, we put our manger scenes up, the reason we put our Christmas trees up is why? For the birth of Jesus. That's what we are celebrating. We want to remember it, and that brings to us a joy that we won't get anyplace else. And what we want to do is try to sustain that sense of joy throughout our lives, and that becomes a lot more difficult. So, what is joy? I learned a long time ago, sometimes it's a lot easier to say what something is not than to say what it is. Especially when we start looking at important Christian themes like what we've been looking at. So what is joy not? Joy is not pleasure. Because pleasure moves from 1 minute to the next. It's a pleasure to sit down, in my opinion, on Wednesday night with you all and have a bite to eat before we get together and study. That's pleasurable for me. Doesn't last. It's a fleeting kind of thing, a fleeting moment. We all have those moments. We can, you get an unexpected check in the mail. Yeah, that's a pleasurable experience, right? But it doesn't last. Because then you go out and spend it and feel guilty about getting in the first place. So it's not that. Sherry, you mentioned happiness, and happiness is another of those words that it's difficult to pin down. The way we use happiness in our culture today has more really to do with the concept of pleasure than anything else. We can be happy one day and unhappy the next, depending on what's happening to us. In the ancient world, and ancient Greeks in particular, with Aristotle said that happiness comes when we become virtuous. When we learn what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to live, how we're supposed to behave. Happiness comes when we're able to be courageous. Happiness comes when we're able to do other things that human beings are supposed to do. But that's not what joy is. Joy is not about being courageous. Joy is not about having a moment, this moment that is wonderful, and the next moment is not being. I mean, y'all know what I'm talking about, don't you? When you can go from 1 minute to the next, and things can change, and therefore our moods can change completely. I mean, that's happened to me more times than I can remember, and to you too. I've used the example before. You can be at church on Sunday morning and leave all happy. You got to sing your favorite hymns. I didn't keep you long, and Phyllis's postlude wasn't too long, so you got out a little bit early. And that's always a joyful experience. Nobody ever complained once about getting out of church early. But then you go to Walmart. And everything that you were feeling 5 minutes before is gone when you start muttering under your breath, using colorful metaphors to express your feeling, right? It can change in an instant. And I've said life in general is like that. You know it too, that your whole life, my whole life, can be upside down, turned completely upside down and inside out in a second. We're not in control of that. So if joy is related to those things that make us feel pleasure, then it's a very fleeting thing. So that's not what New Testament joy or Jesus kind of joy is. It's just fun to see if we can unpack this a little bit and figure it out. Let's look at some scriptures. For our purposes in this season, there are a couple that are really important. In Matthew chapter 2, it says, the wise men rejoiced with exceeding great joy when they saw the star. Exceeding great joy. It sounds almost kind of redundant. Rejoiced with exceeding great joy. But we use both those words. Rejoice in the New Testament. So we rejoice. We experience joy, the same thing. The other one is in Luke, in chapter 2, where the angel goes to the shepherd and announces to them glad tidings of great joy, which will be to all people, right? Now, that's a beautiful little story. I'm going to talk about it, I think, Christmas Eve. How many of you remember the Peanuts version of it? You remember Linus reading or reciting the birth story from Luke? It gives us a sense of, hominess. It feels good. The decorations that we have make us feel good. And maybe those lend into the experience of joy, but that's not what the joy is. Joy means something completely different. In Galatians, Paul lists joy as a part of the fruit of the Spirit. Now, I think most of us, when you look at Galatians 5, if we think about what Paul said there, most of us would use the term fruits of the Spirit, right? Plural. But he doesn't do that. There's one fruit. And that fruit includes joy. And if you have the fruit of the Spirit, you have to have joy. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. The fruit. So it's important for Paul. Joy is something that should be produced in the church, inside of us, and inside our collective body together. Because the fruit of the Spirit is supposed to manifest in the church. Sometimes we try to get the cart before the horse. And I've heard countless people talk over the years about the spiritual gifts, but I'm kind of of the mind that the spiritual gifts will never manifest in the church if the fruit of the Spirit hasn't been manifested first. So without that love, that joy, that patience, peace, it's all tied up together. We're supposed to have that kind of joy. Paul in Philippians 4, rejoice in the Lord. Rejoice in the Lord, and then what? Let your request be made known to him. And then stop worrying about them. And the peace of God that surpasses understanding will keep your hearts. Joy is something that we should have and something that is necessary for us to have if we're going to be the church we're supposed to be and if we're going to be individuals as Christians that we're supposed to be. Now here's a good one. James in the first chapter of his little letter says, consider trials as pure joy. Figure that one out. I can get into good things producing joy, but what about those trials? What about if something happens in our lives that messes our plans up? Where's the joy then? We're supposed to still have it. So, joy in the New Testament comes from the word kairos. Kairos is one of those words in the Greek that is huge in the New Testament. Because kairos is also, kaira is joy. But kairos, from the same root, is one of the most important terms that we use in the church, and that is grace. Kairos is grace. Grace is a gift. We do not earn it. There is nothing you can do to earn God's grace. Absolutely nothing. You cannot be good enough. You cannot do enough. You cannot be whole enough. You will never, ever be able to earn God's grace. It is experienced as a gift. Salvation by grace alone. So that word, kairos, grace, is what we use to talk about God's gift of salvation to us. He gives it to us free of charge. We don't have to pay anything for it. In fact, we couldn't, even if we had all the money in the world, we could never be rich enough to buy it. It is a gift without strings attached to it. We just receive it. But it's also a word that's used, and you've got to look at the context. It's also a word that can be used in when you use the word mercy or forgiveness or charity, any of those things. But the particular word that translates joy, kaira, is one that tells us that whatever joy is, it comes from God's grace. And therefore, It is not something that we can earn, not something we can purchase, only something we can receive as a gift. The Old Testament is similar. Old Testament, of course, being in Hebrew, in the original language. The word that is used in the Old Testament for joy is simcha. I'm not an expert on Hebrew, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And there's also another one sometimes that is used as a synonymous term, and that is sana. And that word sana comes down to us in English as the word sassy. A person who is joyful is a person who is sassy. What do you think about that? Hold on to that for a little bit. The point is that joy, whatever it is, comes to us as a gift. We can't earn it. And Lewis understood that because that's what he was saying in The Weight of Glory, that, in my Christian life, in my pre-Christian life, I would have these moments of joy, and it would make me long for them again. And not having them, not being able to obtain them or recreate the scene, created a longing in me. I wanted that joy. I wanted it again. And so Lewis agrees with really what the Scripture says. That's not something that we can go out and buy. It's a gift. But all of us have experienced it. All of us have. Probably more times than we can remember. We have had those moments of joy. What we want to do is have that more sustained than maybe it is in our lives. And I think that's really what the New Testament is trying to get us to. Having that sense within us that allows us to experience life in a completely different way than perhaps we could ever experience it any other way. And that's what joy will bring to us. It is a gift of God that gets inside of us so that it becomes not a feeling, but a disposition. We want it as a disposition. We have those. And when it becomes a disposition, it's set itself inside of us like a habit. And when you boil it all down, faith is nothing but a habit. It really is. It's just a habit. It's a habit of orienting toward the world by orienting toward God in a different way than you did before. It literally changes your nature until it becomes second nature to you. So dispositions, these things that we have that allow us to act the way that we do and be the same person through time, those dispositions change over time. And in the Christian world, in our experience, we want those, like joy, to be dispositions that we have so that it never changes wherever we go, whoever we meet, whatever we experience. I think it probably 99% of every funeral I've ever done, I've said something to this effect, that joy is something that you can experience even in the deepest grief you'll ever experience. When you can do that, it has become a disposition to you. It has changed you. So it's become a part of your character. And you know what part of that character is? Sassy. You become sassy. It brings to you a feeling of inner delight. There's something about the Christian who has matured that has this view that I can face anything I have to face and not be afraid. Right? It doesn't matter what somebody else does to me. I don't have to be afraid. I don't have anything to fear. I know who has me and I know who will have me. It's a kind of confidence That allowed, in the ancient world, when the Romans were persecuting Christians, it allowed the martyrs to go singing to their deaths. That's joy. It's not about feeling happy, though that can be a part of it. It's not about experiencing good things, though that can be a part of it. It's an unshakable sassiness toward the world. You can't do anything that is going to cause God's love to leave me, that is going to cause God's grace to be absent. I can live with that sense of defiance. I know, like the old song says, I know whom I have believed, in whom I have believed, and am persuaded that he is able to keep me against that day. That's joy. It is getting to a place where you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be shaken. You can be sassy. And when you're sassy like that, things look a lot different when you're going through them. At least in my opinion. All right. That's joy. We got through quick tonight. We can go another hour if you want to. We'll come up and do something on love. We can do it off the cuff. But, all right. That's it. Thank y'all for being a part of this. I hope at least, looking at the three that we've looked at, that maybe in the Advent season in the future, you'll be able to think about what these things mean. What does it mean to have peace? What does it mean to have hope? What does it mean to have joy? They're all gifts from Jesus. All we have to do is receive them. All right. Thank y'all. Y'all keep clapping. I'm not going to do any more.